Tigers, it's been a long, dramatic, somewhat confusing road.
Hey there, welcome to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy. Spider-Man No Way Home was way more complicated than your average Spider-Man movie. So, a lot of you had questions about the film that we answered in our first Plot Holes Explained video. But then, the questions just kept rolling in. So we decided to make a sequel. Franchise, baby! So here we go. Sci Genius noted that Peter could have just asked Doctor Strange to make everyone forget about Mysterio, and then the movie would have been over. But here's the thing. When Strange cast the spell, remember, he made a thin line through the air. Here, he did the same thing when he cast the spell to find Odin in Ragnarok. Well, I'm no wizard, but this seems to me like the spell is related to an individual, and Strange might have even plucked one of Peter's hairs off screen. So, without Quentin Beck's permission, or even his hair, Strange would not have been able to cast that spell. B asked, can someone actually explain Sandman's motivation for turning? Because he just says he doesn't have to care about the other villains getting cured, but then explicitly mentions his daughter. He should have never turned against Peter regardless of trust because, in the end, he just wanted to get back to his daughter.
I just want my kids back.
But see, that's just it. He didn't care about getting himself cured, so he didn't want to stick around. He just wanted to get back home. He doesn't know this Peter Parker. He doesn't want to be involved. He just wants to get home to his kids. Back to the Music asked, did Tobey and Andrew's Spider-Man have everyone in their universe forget who they are? Or, since they were sent home, did it not affect them? So here's my take on this. When Strange cast that original spell, it was in the MCU reality, and then it emanated outward from there. So, if people on the MCU Earth know that Peter is Spider-Man, the effect ripples outward. If people in the MCU don't know who he is, then the spell is kind of like a car running out of gas. It loses strength. I don't think that Strange's new spell affected anyone outside the MCU, because remember, he surrounded himself with runes. As we learned in WandaVision, runes create a magical seal around a person, or in this case, around a reality.
These are runes, Wanda. In a given space, only the witch that casts the runes can use her magic.
If this is true, then the only people who know Peter is Spider-Man, the only people who can relate to him, are his fellow Spider-Men in other dimensions. Actually kind of sweet. I also think that Doctor Strange just isn't powerful enough to create a spell that can span infinite realities. Remember in What If, we learned that the Infinity Stones don't quite work on the same frequency in other dimensions.
Every universe is different, each one just a fraction unique. Thus, the Infinity Stones are unique.
So it stands to reason that magic would be weaker as well. However, blonde but actually brunette does suggest that the other Peters being forgotten would make for a great new Sam Raimi trilogy, and they're right.
¿Dónde están las golosinas?
Doug, you're finally doing it. You're using Babbel to learn Spanish.
Yes, it is my New Year's resolution to ask for treats in Espanol.
That's great. I'm so proud of you. Now, if you have ever thought about learning a new language, but maybe you were too intimidated, then you should try Babbel. They're the sponsor of this video. Babbel helps you to start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. And if you use our link in the description to sign up, you can get up to 65% off your subscription. Babbel uses short 10-minute lessons that are made by actual language teachers, not some AI or an algorithm. The lessons use real-life situations and dialogue that you would actually use in the real world. Like you show up at a party and you don't know anyone and you're looking for your friend. And it really works. University studies have shown that 15 hours of Babbel equates a semester of college Spanish. See, this year we want to travel to Spain, and I don't want to be like this guy.
Does anyone here speak English?
So I'm using Babbel to learn Spanish. If you want to make learning a new language your New Year's resolution, then you can't pass up this offer. Click the link down in the description to get up to 65% off your subscription. So try it out, and if it's not right for you, take advantage of their 20-day money-back guarantee. PPD253 says, so, in theory, if the haywired spell caused everyone that knew Peter Parker was Spider-Man to come into the same universe, regardless of them dying in their own respective timelines and universes, wouldn't that mean that Tony Stark and Mysterio could come back? Now that's interesting, and a bit of a mind f***. First of all, the multiverse is infinite. So there are definitely other universes where there are Tony Starks and Mysterios who know Peter is Spider-Man. And if the final spell had been allowed to continue unchecked, they would have appeared at the end. But you specifically mentioned Tony and Beck dying in their own timeline or universe, which makes me wonder, is it possible that Tony or Beck from the MCU could have appeared at the ending of this movie in the future of their own universe? After all, the multiverse does go hand in hand with time travel. Okay, let me explain. We learned in Loki and Avengers Endgame that every time somebody travels through time, they create a branching reality. Now, if that person doesn't make a consequential change in this new reality, then it kind of folds back into the original timeline. Like in Loki, he went to Pompeii, he messed things up, and it didn't matter. The new reality that he created just kind of folded back into the original. But Tony Stark and the Avengers drastically changed the past when they took away the Infinity Stones. So it is possible that there are other Tonys out there created by the events of Endgame. A version where he had a heart attack after the Battle of New York, for example. And it is possible that this Tony Stark could have shown up at the end of No Way Home, because he would have been from a different reality. Lincoln Pasquale says, the real question nobody is asking is, how and when did Peter learn to sew spandex or whatever into a form-fitting suit that actually looks professionally made? His last cloth suit was a hoodie and sweatpants. Well, at least he didn't create an intricate costume with external rubber webbing like Toby did. My take on it is that he practiced sewing. It's not that hard and he has plenty of free time now. Frank Lee Young says, when Electro acknowledges Dr. Conners by name, Doc Ock should also know him because that's his good friend in his own Raimi universe. But all he says is, you know this creature? Yeah, okay, look, that's true. He is friends with Curt Conners in his reality.
Now I remember you. You're Conners' student. Tells me you're brilliant. He also tells me you're lazy.
But I just think he wouldn't care enough to say something. Or Doc Ock is sitting back, taking all this in, learning about the multiverse and keeping his cards close to his chest. Rogat says, couldn't Endgame be solved just by making Thanos forget about the Infinity Stones? If Strange could exclude people from the spell, then it means he can also make the spell very specific. Well, we saw Thanos break through the mirror dimension and fight off Doctor Strange's magic. I'm going to assume that the spell wouldn't work on him. Or even if it did, Thanos is such a powerful force of nature that he would have eventually learned of all the stones and started all over. Doctor Strange saw over 14 million possibilities, and I'm betting that making Thanos forget was at least one of them. And we all know that the only thing that can make Thanos forget about the Infinity Stones is T'Challa.
I'm a big enough man to admit when I'm wrong.
Dukas Figuralis says, for me, the biggest plot hole was Strange sending Peter to capture all the villains. If Strange's plan was just to use the box to send them back, it doesn't make a difference if they're all gathered up in his dungeon or roaming around. All of them would go back. They say this in the movie, they actually all had to be near the box for it to work. Atari Dad has a great question. When Doc Ock first saw the Green Goblin on the freeway, he immediately identified him as Norman Osborn. How could he have possibly known this? Green Goblin's identity was never made public. Not even his own son found out until Spider-Man 3. Now there is a really easy explanation for this. This Doc Ock, the one we met in No Way Home, is not the same one we saw in Spider-Man 2. He's a variant. We made a whole video about this, pointing out that he wears glasses that were broken by Aunt May, and he doesn't wear this sweater in his death scene. So it could be that in his universe, Norman's identity was revealed. Or maybe Otto Octavius is just a smart dude who figured out the Green Goblin's real identity. Joe Waters also points out that Sandman said that he saw the news that Norman was killed by his own glider. Now we remember how Harry didn't even find out till Spider-Man 3. Well, it could be that after the events of Spider-Man 3, the news got out, and that's how Sandman knows. Or he's a variant too. Fun Games 1021 asks, when Doctor Strange sent everybody back, why was there a piece of Venom staying behind? Wouldn't everything have disappeared? Well, remember at the end of Let There Be Carnage, Venom tells Eddie,
80 billion light years of hive knowledge across universes.
Hive mind across universes, meaning that the symbiotes exist across the multiverse. So these creatures naturally produce and spread through different realities. Also, that little spawn technically isn't Venom. It's a new entity, his own offspring. Joshy B says instead of, giving the serum to the villains in their cells, a controlled environment, they brought them all to an apartment because they were hiding from Doctor Strange. They didn't want him to come back from the mirror dimension and send the villains home. Andrew has a good point here. Why isn't it common knowledge that Mysterio was an ex-Stark employee with a grudge? Sure, some will still believe that he's a warrior from another Earth, but most will not. This guy and his whole team were able to disguise their illusion from a Skrull with Skrull tech. I'm pretty sure they could scrub his identity off the grid. But even then, this is why that multiverse idea was so genius. He's not the Quentin Beck who worked for Stark. He's a different Quentin Beck from another Earth. Shesaw asks, how did Peter survive after the world forgot about Peter? Without a house, social security number, or any documentation, school certificate, how did he just up and rent a flat? Well, we actually did a whole video about the forgetting spell explaining how it could work. My take is that even though people don't remember Peter, physical objects like his birth certificate still exist. It's just that people don't remember them. Or, in the case of news stories about Peter being Spider-Man or pics on MJ's phone, they just naturally kind of ignore them. Like when Papa John's introduces a no pizza.
See, nobody cares.
Mikhail Cold says No Way Home takes place straight after the second movie, which is a summer trip with the school. But at the end of the movie, we see Peter swim swing out past the Rockefeller Christmas tree. So how long did the movie take place? The trip does end during the summer. Then Peter's life falls apart as he starts his senior year in the fall. Then he sees Halloween decorations in the coffee shop, and this inspires him to go see Doctor Strange. So the events of the movie take place over a couple days in October, and then the ending is showing us a couple of months later. Ricky B. Blessed says Strange initially needed to perform the memory wipe spell within the Sanctum because of its connection to different mystical entities, but at the end, he pulled off an even larger memory spell out in the open. How? My take here is that his spell at the end of the movie was more of a course correction spell, altering the spell that he had to cast within the Sanctum's walls. X-Leader99 says the biggest plot hole is a teenager straight into college, able to afford an apartment in New York City by himself, albeit a cheap one, with no financial help from family or friends such as Happy or Aunt May. Also, this is happening post-blip when we know there is a housing shortage. Simple solution. He sells pictures of Spider-Man to the Daily Bugle. He's basically a superhero paparazzi, and those photos would sell for bank. Mike Marks asks, why was there a door open to the Sanctum in Siberia? Now, he's talking about how the Sanctum was filled with snow. Strange says this is because a door was accidentally left open. And, guys, this actually foreshadows the end of the movie when the doors to other universes are left wide open. And he also asks why Peter could resist Steven while he's being pushed out of his body to the astral plane. Now, we covered this in our first plot holes video, but the short answer is, in the comics, Peter's spider sense is actually a mystical ability that comes from the multiverse itself. Because the power is mystical, it's able to overcome Strange separating him from his astral form. Harris Gregory says the fact that Doctor Strange said he was above the Grand Canyon for 15 hours when the webs only last 3. But he was in the mirror dimension where the normal laws of physics just don't apply.
That thing does not obey the laws of physics at all.
Liam G says, this is a minor plot hole I found, but when and why did Spider-Man switch out the black and yellow spider costume? It was there one moment and gone the next. Well, that costume was actually his other suit turned inside out to hide the green paint. I believe in the movie that Aunt May says she found a way to remove the paint. Pasquale says, why didn't Peter try to contact Nick Fury for help? Well, he did. He mentioned Fury to the guy at Damage Control, and then that guy said that Fury was off-world. So this dude at Damage Control didn't know that there was a Skrull filling in for Fury. And it's not like Peter had Fury's number. The bigger question is, why did Talos leave Peter hanging out to dry? I bet we find out why in Secret Invasion. Heroes Unite Us has a great question. If the spell at the end of the movie made everyone forget about Peter's existence, how does this affect Edith? If Peter was the only one with access to that technology, and now he doesn't exist, does this mean that the Edith access and protocols are lost forever? So this opens up a whole other question of whether or not AI are technically alive, like the Vision is. If they are, then the spell makes them forget. If AI are not alive, then it means that they are essentially objects. And like I said earlier, objects showing Peter's existence would either be erased or people would willfully ignore them. If that's the case, it does seem like Peter could pick up the Edith glasses and still maintain control. Gister asks, how are Ned and MJ friends without Peter at the end? If they have no knowledge of Peter's existence, won't their BFF memories together just be weird Spider-Man-based events without actually knowing who Spider-Man is? And I compare this to maybe a local restaurant. If you go to the same restaurant every day, you probably don't remember the first time you went there. The forgetting spell makes people not look closely at past events, but their emotional connections remain, just like how Happy still loved May. Therefore, MJ and Ned would still have their friendship. John D. Ruddy asks, so does Adrian Toomes also forget about Peter Parker? And how do you think he'll fit into Morbius? Yes, he forgets about Peter Parker, but he remembers Spider-Man. And I have no idea how he fits into Morbius or what the f is happening in that movie. I'm showing up for Jared Harris. This is actually, Ben says, not a plot hole with Spider-Man, but the main question for the MCU in general. Eternals takes place in the same time period as No Way Home and Hawkeye, though neither addressed that one huge celestial was emerging from the ocean. Now, look, the real reason for this is that the filmmakers the MCU hires are kept in the dark about each other's projects. But in universe, people don't know about the Celestial Seed. I believe that they referred to the Celestial in the news as a rock formation that sprouted from the Earth. As for the second Celestial appearing, we don't actually know when this happens. It could have been after Far From Home. A better question is why the gravity of this Celestial didn't immediately create tidal waves that destroyed the Earth. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. If you have any more questions or plot holes, be sure to leave them down in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.